Right, well, I've covered your CPU, but now it's time to take a look at just how warm your GPU gets inside of the NZXT H440. Hello everybody and welcome to Tech Uploaded. I'm Chris and today I'm going to hopefully be addressing the question I've been getting quite a bit since I did my cooling video on the CPU portion of things inside of the H440 here. And that is, what about the GPU? Now the reason I've been getting this question a lot is because many of you are thinking about doing an SLI setup in this system and you're a little bit concerned that since airflow isn't the greatest in this case, that too much heat's going to build up down here in the GPU area and you may actually be blowing so much heat onto the second card that things could overheat. So full disclosure, I don't have two 780 classified, so I can't actually do a test in SLI to see if it's going to overheat. But what I do have is a 780 classified with the ACX Aftermarket cooler, and then a 780 Ti, which is a reference design. So while the 780 classified is overclocked out of the box, definitely is going to generate a little bit more heat and blow it into the case, I figure, all right, let's just go completely unscientific, and put that card in there and see just how warm it gets. We'll check the sensor on the card because it shows that when it's running the benchmark, see how warm that gets, and then I'll put the little portable weather station that I have that has a thermometer on it that's actually incredibly accurate, and we'll stick that down in the bottom up close to the glass so I can read it, right in the area where you're going to be blowing all of the heat if you had a card sitting below my one and only 780 classified. So we'll just pretend there's another one in there and we'll make that the thermometer and see what it actually reads. Then I'm going to switch that out and put the 780 Ti in there, and that is the reference dial, and see if it makes a big difference as far as how much heat gets generated in the case. And then finally, just for fun, I'll do the reading, then I'll kick the fans up to full speed because, you know, some of the sensors in the case, they may not pick up on the fact things are getting a little too warm down here. So we'll just boost the fans up manually, see if that makes a difference running everything at 100%. And then finally, I'm going to pop off the front and the top of the case and see if when we just open things wide up, if that helps make a big difference. We'll do that for both the 780 classified and the 780 Ti. Again, is this the most scientific thing in the world? No, but hopefully it'll kind of address your question there. So let's get to it. All right, so I've got the air conditioning on once again to keep the ambient temperature in the room at 23 Celsius, and then I am starting the Valley benchmark right now, which I will run for 30 minutes, and we'll see just how warm things get. You can see on the thermometer inside of the computer that things are already heating up. We are at about 31 degrees and climbing slowly but surely. So right now, looking at the temperature sensor, I am at 58 on the 780 classified, and I also have hardware monitor up and running as well because I do have the benchmark running in windowed mode so I can keep an eye on everything as it goes. And hardware monitor is in agreement with the temperatures that I am getting within Valley, so they are communicating properly with each other. All right, so it has been just about 30 minutes, and I've had the Valley benchmark running for the entire time, and it looks like we've settled in at roughly 44 degrees Celsius inside of the actual computer itself, below the graphics card, and the temperatures on the card look to have maxed out at 78 and is currently at 77. Now, the computer's fan profile is actually very mild right now. It's not making a whole lot of noise. So I figured why not go ahead and boost up the fans all the way to the maximum and see what happens to the temperature inside the case. All right, so after about 5 minutes of letting everything run with the fan profile set to full speed, temperatures have dropped down to roughly 73 degrees on the actual sensor on the graphics card itself, and it looks like we are at 40 degrees even inside the case. So obviously airflow is making it through the case, and again that's evidenced by the increase in the wind speed sensor on the actual device itself. So now the big question is, what happens when we open everything up and get these panels out of the way? Okay, so everything's been running now for, again, about another 5 minutes, but this time I've taken the panels off the front and the top of the case, exposing the fans, which are two 140 millimeter Noctua airflow fans in the front and two 140 millimeter Corsair AF 140s in the top. So huge difference here. You can see the temperature inside the case now is about 31 degrees, and the temperature on the GPU itself has dropped down to 68. And the big difference actually is the CPU temps drop down about 7 or 8 degrees depending on which core you're looking at, going from being in the 40s to now being in the mid to upper 30s depending on which core you're actually taking the reading from. So big difference by taking off those panels on the H440. Right, so now I've had the Valley benchmark running for 30 minutes once again, but this time with the reference cooler on a 780 Ti. Now this card definitely does run a bit warmer as it settled in at 83 degrees just a few minutes into the test and pretty much stayed locked at 83 degrees consistently through the entire time. So the temperature didn't fluctuate nearly as much on this one as it did on the ACX cooling. However, you'll notice by seeing the temps inside of the case, we were at about 32.5 degrees, which is substantially less than we were at with the ACX cooling on the aftermarket design. So this is a pretty clear indication for why people tend to recommend the reference card versus using something like an aftermarket cooler when you're doing an SLI setup. All of the heat gets pumped out the back of the computer instead of blowing back inside. After 5 minutes with the fan profile set to full speed, temperatures really haven't changed all that much. The 780 Ti is still at 83 degrees, and oddly enough, the temperature inside of the case actually rose slightly, within a margin of error, I would think, but nonetheless, it didn't really make a difference in cooling things down. Whereas when we had the ACX cooler in there, boosting the fans up did make a little bit of a difference. So overall, the reference cooler, I mean, it's by design and it works well for what it is. The card does get a little bit warm, but it also helps keep most of that warm air outside of the computer. So boosting up the fans using the reference cooler really doesn't get you a whole lot. Okay, so this is a little weird. After 5 minutes of letting the computer run with the full fan profile with the side panels removed, whereas when we had the ACX cooler in the system, it actually made a big difference cooling things down. With the reference design, temperatures actually went up. And I have a couple theories for why this may be, but I think once the airflow has the ability to go wherever it wants to go, air isn't being pulled up from below the GPU anymore. It's just being pulled from any point in the case where air can get in and get out. So I believe the temperatures were actually a little bit lower when everything was buttoned up because airflow was more directed, and the actual reference cooler of the 780 Ti was able to pull air directly from below the card and vent it out the back, which was keeping temperatures actually a little bit cooler directly below the GPU. Now that air can go wherever it wants, temperatures are a little bit all over the place. Now, the temperature on the card itself went from 83 to 81, so that improved. But as you can see, the temperature below the card is now at 37. So it's gone up, around 4 degrees, almost 5. So that's, a fairly big jump. Now, I will say that the CPU, just as before, did cool down about 5 degrees overall, and the temperatures in the case seem to be leveling out a little bit more. But not having things tightened up did increase temperatures in the area where you would have a second GPU. All right, so what did we learn here? The results were a little bit weird, actually. It's the results I got with the aftermarket cooling, the ACX that was on the EVGA 780 classified, were more along the lines of what I expected to see. The more airflow I allowed to get into the case, the more the temperatures went down in the area below the GPU, simply because that card was venting everything back into the case. Now, with the 780 Ti, which is a hotter running card in general, the temperatures on the card were higher. However, they were more consistent, and the temperature inside the case was actually lower with the default settings. The lowest temperatures that I got of the entire test were with the fans under standard profile and the case all buttoned up. So take from that what you will. Like I said at the beginning of the video, this is by no means a yes or no on whether or not you can do SLI in this case and not have any kind of a heating issue. I think that as long as you keep, if you're using the aftermarket, then I think you need to make sure that you focus heavily on airflow. Make sure that you have good fans, you've got some good airflow fans in the case, you keep everything moving, and I think as long as you do that, you should be fine. If you're using aftermarket and your temps are getting a little hot, then just boost up your fan profile and that should help things out. I don't think you're gonna have an issue running SLI, just make it a little bit warm. Now, I should point out as well, I did not have the 780 overclocked, the classified 780 overclocked any further than it was just out of the box. Now, the whole point of having a classified is you can overclock it pretty heavily. If you overclocked that card and you had two of them sitting right against each other, yeah, I think you might have some problems there because the card does get warm. I've seen that card go up to almost 90 with an overclock when I do overvolting. And that's with just one card. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, if you haven't bought anything yet and you're thinking about going SLI, I would highly suggest that you use the reference design if you're going to do it. I mean, the temperatures speak for themselves. It does keep things cooler overall around the card. While the card did run a little bit warmer and the fan is a little bit louder, your case temperatures are going to stay cooler, so you're not going to be blasting extra heat onto the second card. So take the numbers for what you will, and hopefully it kind of helps guide you in making a decision. And you know, again, if anything, if you haven't purchased a card yet, hopefully this helps you decide between whether you want to go for aftermarket cooling or you want to go for the reference design. As always, thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, go ahead and click on that subscribe button. You can also follow me on Twitter over at Tech Uploaded. And I have to say, it's been a fun journey in the old H440 case, but it's time to retire it because the next build is coming soon, and this is going to actually become more of my test bed. So since the panels pop off so nicely, it actually kind of suits itself well for that. So that's probably what will come of the H440 case. So if you have any other questions about this case, now is the time to ask, so please leave them in the comments below, or you can also send them to me on Twitter. You know the drill. Don't be a stranger. Check back soon.